Aboard the flagship, Vexthar reviewed the disturbing footage for the 7th time. His peripheral eyes monitored the increasingly agitated movements of his officers, while his main visual cluster remained fixed on the final frame, the inside of an empty helmet, surrounded by undisturbed lunar dust. "Analysis," he demanded. Science officer Zexley approached the display, her carapace plates clicking nervously against each other. The atmospheric readings show no contaminants, no toxins, no pathogens. The team's life signs simply ceased. Simultaneously, Vexthar's mandibles twitched with skepticism. "No, Commander." In sequence, precisely 15 seconds apart. As if, she hesitated. "Speak freely." As if they were being systematically eliminated by something moving from one to the next. Security Chief Karthak scoffed, his exoskeleton flushing the deep crimson of aggression. "Impossible. Our warriors wear Class 9 environmental armor. Nothing on that primitive rock could penetrate it." Vexthar magnified a portion of the image, a strange smudge on the inner faceplate. "And this?" Zexley's antennae drooped, a human fingerprint. Inside the sealed helmet, the command chamber fell silent. Tactical displays showed the Earth rotating serenely below, broadcasting its primitive communications, its inhabitants going about their business with no apparent awareness of the armada assembling in their system. "Perhaps," offered Strategy Minister Velmax, "we should conduct more thorough reconnaissance before proceeding." Karthak's mandibles clattered in derision. "The High Command has already approved this conquest. The humans possess resources we require, and their system's position is strategically valuable." He gestured toward the tactical display. "Look at them. No unified planetary government, still fighting among themselves over resources and territory. Primitive projectile weapons, no defensive grid, no significant space presence. They're barely into their atomic age." Vexthar chittered thoughtfully, all 6 eyes blinking in sequence. "Yet something eliminated 2 of our teams without leaving traces. A natural phenomenon," Karthak insisted. "Radiation. Solar flares. Something our scientists haven't cataloged yet." The debate might have continued, but for a junior communications officer who approached with uncharacteristic hesitation, holding a small object. "Commander, this was found in the primary communications array. It's not one of ours." Vexthar examined the object, a small cylinder of primitive design, containing a dark liquid. He scanned it with his personal analyzer. "It's called coffee," Zexley explained, reviewing the chemical composition. "A mild stimulant the humans consume. This variety is designated espresso." "How did it get inside our communications array?" Vexthar demanded. No one answered. No one could. The War Council convened an hour later. The Arch-General's hologram dominated the chamber, his ancient exoskeleton bearing the marks of a dozen successful conquests. "These reports of ghost warriors are unworthy of Zolaxian officers," he declared. 17 worlds have fallen before us. Earth will be the 18th. Commence the invasion as planned." As the hologram faded, Vexthar noticed something on the council table that hadn't been there before, a small figurine carved from lunar stone, depicting the human soldier in strange armor. Beneath it lay a note in perfect Zolaxian script. "We look forward to your visit." No security alert had been triggered. No sensors had detected an intrusion. Yet something, had entered the most secure chamber of the flagship and left an invitation. Vexthar crushed the figurine in his claw, but the unease remained. For the first time in his illustrious career, he found himself silently questioning the wisdom of the High Command's orders. But orders they remained. "Prepare the invasion force," he commanded, even as his secondary heart pulsed with an unfamiliar rhythm that, in another species, might have been recognized as fear. The emergency council aboard the command carrier Inevitable Victory grew increasingly heated as surveillance footage from the derelict vessels played on loop. Captain Nexala, her carapace still gleaming with youth despite 3 successful campaigns, manipulated the holographic controls. "We've enhanced the imagery to maximum clarity," she explained, freezing the frame on a dark figure that appeared for precisely 2 frames. "This is our clearest view of the intruders." The gathered commanders leaned forward, optical clusters adjusting to better process what they were seeing. The figure was unmistakably human, but clad in a form-fitting suit that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The face remained obscured behind a featureless mask, with only a pair of eyes visible. Disturbingly calm, almost amused. "How did they board our vessels?" demanded Admiral Kexvor, pounding a limb against the conference table. "Our shields were at full strength. Our sensors detected no approaching craft." Nexala hesitated. "That's the most disturbing part, Admiral. According to the sensor logs, they didn't." "Explain," Vexthar ordered, all eyes fixed on the junior officer. "The logs show no external breaches, no airlock activations, no shuttle dockings. It's as if..." She struggled to formulate the impossible, as if they were already aboard before the ships entered the system. Strategic Intelligence Officer Mexral, a veteran of information warfare against a dozen species, manipulated her data tablet. "There is another possibility. Our xenobiologists have been analyzing human communications. It appears this particular military branch specializes in psychological manipulation." She projected a series of human military insignias. "Their special forces undergo training specifically designed to maximize fear in their opponents. The disappearances, the inexplicable appearances of Earth objects, the targeting of our communication systems, these are calculated to induce maximum psychological disorientation." Admiral Kexvor's mandibles clattered with relief. "So it's trickery. Primitive deception." "With respect, Admiral," Mexral continued, "that doesn't explain how they executed these tricks aboard vessels with security protocols that have withstood the most advanced civilizations in known space." The meeting descended into chittering chaos until Vexthar slammed all 4 primary limbs against the table. "Enough. The facts remain. 3 vessels have been completely abandoned, crews vanish without explanation. Our mission parameters have not changed." As if on cue, the ship's lighting flickered momentarily. When illumination returned to normal, a steaming Earth beverage sat at each commander's place setting, arranged in perfect symmetry. The room froze in stunned silence. "Security breach," Admiral Kexvor screeched, leaping back from the table. "Lock down the Admiral's voice cut off as the wall-mounted display switched to an image of Earth's moon. A crude message had been carved into the lunar surface, large enough to be visible from high orbit. "We see you." "Magnify," Vexthar ordered, his voice unnaturally steady. As the image zoomed in, they could see that the giant letters were composed of thousands of smaller marks. Further magnification revealed the horrifying truth. The message had been drawn using the Zolaxian's own missing landing craft, arranged meticulously across the lunar landscape. Tactician Dexmal, renowned for his analytical mind, broke the silence. "They want us to know that our reconnaissance wasn't secret at all. That they've been watching us since we arrived. That they..." He trailed off, mandibles trembling. "That they what?" Vexthar demanded. "That they consider this amusing," Dexmal finished. The ship's AI announced an incoming transmission on the emergency channel. Without waiting for authorization, the view screen activated, showing a human female in what appeared to be casual attire rather than military uniform. She sat at a desk covered with papers, a steaming mug beside her. "Hello, Commander Vexthar," she said pleasantly, pronouncing his name with perfect inflection. "I'm Captain Sullivan, Terran Special Forces Diplomatic Corps. I notice you've been having some difficulties with your fleet. Perhaps it's time we had a conversation about your intentions in our system." Before anyone could respond, the transmission ended, replaced by scrolling text. Complete dossiers on every officer in the room, including private communications, psychological profiles, and detailed anatomical weaknesses. The message was clear. We know everything about you. We can reach you anywhere, and we're just getting started. Dawn broke across the Martian landscape, bathing the Zolaxian forward base in pale crimson light. Engineers worked feverishly to restore defensive systems that had inexplicably deactivated during the night. Vexthar strode through the command center, where technicians huddled over the mysterious Earth data device connected to their central computer. Progress, he demanded. Chief Technical Specialist Zorlek's antennae twitched anxiously. We've accessed the device, Commander. It contains disturbing material. The main screen flickered to life, displaying footage labeled Tier 1 Selection Course, Terran Special Forces. The assembled Zolaxians watched in horrified fascination as humans subjected themselves to what appeared to be ritualistic torture. Soldiers carrying enormous weights ran until they collapsed, only to be revived and forced to continue. Others were bound and submerged in freezing water for durations that exceeded Zolaxian breath-holding capacity by factors of 5. Some voluntarily exposed themselves to environmental extremes that would kill most sentient species. "This can't be standard training," muttered Security Chief Karthak. "These must be execution videos disguised as propaganda." Zorlek manipulated the controls. "There's more. This section is labeled Infiltration Techniques." The display showed humans practicing movement patterns that minimized detection by various sensor types, including specific models used exclusively by the Zolaxian military. They demonstrated methods for defeating biometric scanners, bypassing neural interfaces, and manipulating security systems that shouldn't have been known outside the Imperium. "How do they have this knowledge?" Vexthar whispered. No one answered. The final segment showed humans in sensory deprivation chambers, subjected to hallucinogenic compounds while solving complex mathematical equations. The narration, provided in flawless Zolaxian language, explained that this trained operatives to maintain cognitive function while experiencing extreme psychological stress. Tactical Officer Pexabom, newly arrived from the fleet, approached with a data tablet. "Commander, we've completed analysis of the anatomical diagrams left in the barracks. They're remarkably accurate." Meaning? They didn't just identify our physiological vulnerabilities, they highlighted weaknesses our own medical science hasn't cataloged. Pressure points that can incapacitate without killing. Neural clusters that, when stimulated precisely, can induce temporary paralysis. A junior communications specialist interrupted, her exoskeleton pale with stress. "Commander, we're receiving reports from the fleet. 3 more vessels have gone silent. And there's something else." She hesitated. "The dreams. They're spreading." "Explain," Vexthar ordered. "The shared nightmare of humans watching us sleep. It's now reported across the entire invasion force. Medical officers are documenting increased stress hormones, sleep deprivation, and cognitive impairment." Outside the command center, a commotion erupted. Vexthar rushed to investigate and found soldiers clustered around a landing pad where an unauthorized shuttle had appeared. The craft bore Zolaxian military markings, but no one had authorized its arrival. "Scan it," Vexthar ordered. "No life signs," reported a security officer. "But there's something inside." When the shuttle's hatch opened automatically, the gathered soldiers raised weapons, only to lower them in confusion. The shuttle's interior had been reconfigured into what appeared to be a human living space, complete with furniture, food preparation equipment, and wall decorations. A primitive audio device activated, playing what cultural databases identified as jazz music. On a central table lay a single document, printed on earth paper, containing what appeared to be a military assessment of Zolaxian capabilities. Each section had been evaluated and marked with phrases like "inadequate against Tier 2 operators" or "obsolete by Earth standards." The final page bore a handwritten note: "Your species has potential. Suggest immediate withdrawal to avoid unnecessary demonstration of capacity gap." Vexthar studied the document, awareness crystallizing into certainty. This wasn't just psychological warfare. It was a professional courtesy from one military force to another, a warning from predator to prey. "Prepare for immediate evacuation," he ordered, silencing the protests of his officers with a gestural command rarely used in Zolaxian military hierarchy, one that brooked no discussion. "We're redeploying to the outer system." As the evacuation order spread through the base, no one noticed the small cameras concealed within ventilation systems, transmitting every reaction to unseen observers evaluating the effectiveness of their messaging strategy. The data chip spinning on the War Council table contained more than just personnel files. As science officer Zexley accessed deeper directories, she uncovered detailed schematics of the indomitable Dominion itself, not the publicly available specifications, but the actual engineering diagrams including classified modifications and recent upgrades. "This is impossible," she whispered, mandibles quivering. "These sections are quantum-locked in isolated networks. Even our own engineers must request temporary access." Vexthar studied the schematics, his exoskeleton darkening with stress pigmentation. "What else?" Zexley navigated through encrypted folders. Patrol schedules, security codes, sensor blind spots. She paused at a file labeled simply Weaknesses. "Commander, this document outlines 37 critical vulnerabilities in our flagship's design. Some are ones we weren't aware of." Admiral Kexifor leaned forward, optical clusters narrowing. "Are they accurate?" After a moment of analysis, Zexley's antennae drooped in confirmation. "Completely. They've identified structural weaknesses our own stress tests missed, including," she hesitated, "a theoretical method to trigger a cascade failure in our primary reactor using only a handheld device." The chamber fell into uneasy silence, broken only by the soft hum of life support systems that suddenly seemed less reliable. How long would it take to address these vulnerabilities? Vexthar asked. "Weeks, at minimum," Engineering Chief Bortel replied. "Some would require complete reconstruction of key systems." Vexthar's secondary hearts pumped rapidly as implications crystallized. "They're showing us they could destroy us at any moment, but are choosing not to." Intelligence Officer Mexral's manipulator appendages trembled slightly as she transferred additional data to the main display. "There's more, Commander. They've included a detailed analysis of our attempted conquests over the past 3 centuries. The display showed Zolaxian military campaigns against 17 distinct civilizations. Each entry included tactical assessments, casualty figures, and technological advantages that had secured victory. "This is from our secure historical archives," Admiral Kexifor hissed. "How could they possibly?" "The final page," Mexral interrupted, uncharacteristically breaking protocol. "It contains their conclusion." Text appeared on screen in clinical, precise Zolaxian script. "The Zolaxian Imperium has consistently targeted species with minimal military capability or technological disadvantages. In 94.3% of engagements, victory was achieved through overwhelming force against opponents lacking effective countermeasures. No evidence of tactical innovation when facing unexpected resistance." Assessment. "The Zolaxian military is adapted for conquest of pre-spaceflight or early development civilizations, but lacks capacity for asymmetric warfare against technologically comparable opponents." The assessment was signed simply, "Captain Sullivan, TSF Analysis Division." "They're not just studying our technology," Vexthar said quietly. "They're studying our culture, our history, our patterns." When Vexthar retired to his chamber that night, he took unprecedented precautions. He activated personal shields, set 4 separate alarm systems, and positioned 2 guards inside his sleeping chamber, a breach of traditional privacy, considered extreme even in combat situations. None of it mattered. He awoke to the aroma of the earth beverage they called coffee. The human sat comfortably in an adaptation of Zolaxian furniture, wearing what appeared to be casual attire rather than combat gear. No weapons were visible. The guards remained at their posts, seemingly unaware of the intruder. "They can't see me," the human said conversationally. "Specialized field technology. Only you can perceive my presence." "What do you want?" Vexthar asked, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. The human sipped from the steaming cup. "Just a conversation. My superiors feel direct communication might be more efficient than leaving more gifts. You could have requested formal diplomatic contact." A smile. "Where would be the fun in that? Besides, we needed to establish certain parameters first, such as your ability to breach our security at will." Among other things, the human gestured toward Vexthar's ceremonial armor mounted on the wall. "You have an impressive military history. 17 successful conquests. We have a similar record, though under different circumstances. You speak as if your species has fought interstellar wars. Your civilization has barely left its own planet." The human's expression shifted subtly. "Appearances can be deceiving, Commander. You might want to ask yourself why a species that appears so primitive has technology that renders your most advanced security systems irrelevant." Before Vexthar could respond, the human stood, placing the empty cup on a shelf holding ancestral relics. "Consider this a personal courtesy between military professionals. My assignment was to evaluate your threat potential and strategic intentions. My report is due in 6 hours." "And what will you recommend?" The human smile returned, but lacked warmth. "That depends entirely on your next move, Commander." Then the intruder was simply gone, not with dramatic technology or visible effect, but with the casual ease of someone stepping into another room. Only the lingering aroma of coffee and the chocolate replica of Vexthar's sidearm provided evidence the encounter had occurred at all. The meditation chamber fell silent as Dr. Kazavex activated a holographic display showing neural scans of Zolaxian crew members. The patterns pulsed with alarming irregularity, stress indicators flaring across multiple cognitive regions. "These are not isolated incidents," she explained, her scientific detachment failing to mask her concern. "Over 60% of our forces now exhibit severe sleep disruption, hypervigilance, and mounting paranoia. Medications are increasingly ineffective." Vexthar studied the scans. "Explain the evolutionary comparison you mentioned earlier." Dr. Kazavex adjusted the display to show parallel timelines of human and Zolaxian development. "Our species evolved from hive-dwelling insectoids. Protection came through numbers, coordinated defense, and retreat to secure nests when threatened. The timeline illustrated Zolaxian ancestral swarms building elaborate underground structures. Humans evolved differently. The display shifted to show early humans on Earth's savannas. They developed as endurance predators with remarkable adaptability to environmental extremes. While we retreated to safety when threatened, they pursued their prey relentlessly." Captain Lether, a veteran of the Procyon campaign, chittered skeptically. "Many species evolved as predators. The draconids of Ta Sidi were apex hunters. Yet we conquered them in a standard campaign." "The draconids were ambush predators," Dr. Kazavex countered. "They attacked with overwhelming force, but retreated if initial assault failed. Humans." She displayed footage of primitive human tribes tracking wounded animals across vast distances. "They pursue. They adapt. They learn. Most disturbingly, they appear to derive psychological satisfaction from overcoming increasingly difficult challenges." The display showed human sporting events, mountain climbing, endurance races, competitions designed to push participants beyond normal physical limits. "They voluntarily subject themselves to hardship and pain," she continued. "Their recreational activities would qualify as punishment or torture in most civilized societies. And their military elites, these special forces, take this tendency to extremes." Vexthar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You're suggesting that our traditional tactics are not merely ineffective, but counterproductive." "Precisely. Our security measures, our fortress mentality, these signal to human predatory instincts that we are prey. The more we fortify, the more interesting we become as a challenge." The briefing was interrupted by a communications specialist rushing into the chamber, protocol forgotten in her agitation. Commander, the countdown timers on the empty ships, they've all reached 0 simultaneously. Effects. Vexthar demanded, rising. Unknown. The ships remain intact, but all communication systems have activated on emergency channels. Broadcasting. Broadcasting what? Music, Commander. Earth music. And images. From inside this vessel. Vexthar followed her to the communication center, where technicians worked frantically to block the transmission. On multiple screens, footage played of the Zolaxian War Council from various angles, including perspectives physically impossible from any known location in the chamber. More disturbing were images from Vexthar's private quarters, the mess hall, engineering sections designated as secure areas. They'd been recording us, Security Chief Karthak hissed, studying us like laboratory specimens. The images were intercut with footage of Terran special forces conducting training exercises that mimicked the exact layout of Zolaxian vessels. Operators moved through mock-ups of the flagship's corridors, practicing infiltration techniques tailored specifically to Zolaxian security systems. The broadcast concluded with a simple text message: assessment period complete. Final classification: minimal strategic threat. Recommendation: field exercise for junior operators only. Vexthar understood immediately. The humans weren't even deploying their veteran forces. This was training for their inexperienced recruits. The implications settled over the command staff like a physical weight. They hadn't merely underestimated a primitive species, they had unwittingly challenged an entirely different category of opponent. Throughout the fleet that night, the shared nightmares intensified. Zolaxians found themselves not in darkness, but in brightly lit human facilities, laid out on examination tables, while calm voices discussed their physiology, psychology, and tactical doctrines. The voices always concluded with the same assessment: interesting specimens, but limited strategic significance. Worst of all was the growing suspicion, whispered among exhausted crew members in the ship's mess halls. What if the humans weren't using unknown technology to induce these dreams? What if they were simply accurate memories, experienced by bodies that had been temporarily borrowed? The landing craft designated Imperial Spearhead juddered as it entered Earth's atmosphere, its navigation system struggling against mysterious interference. In the command compartment, Strike Leader Teveroth watched as projected landing coordinates shifted erratically across the tactical display. Manual override, he ordered, mandibles clicking in frustration as his crew rushed to comply. Unresponsive, Strike Leader, the pilot reported, appendages dancing across controls that no longer obeyed commands. The system acknowledges input but continues course correction regardless. Through the viewports, Teveroth could see the other landing craft experiencing similar difficulties, their tight formation dissolving as each vessel veered toward different coordinates. The intended target, a major human population center designated New York, disappeared from the navigation system, replaced by coordinates in a region identified as Death Valley. Planet-side communications erupted with confusion as vessels reported similar redirections to the Antarctic wastes, Siberian tundra, the Central Sahara, and the middle of various oceans. The carefully orchestrated assault had been scattered to Earth's most inhospitable environments. When Imperial Spearhead finally touched down, Teveroth led his battle-ready troops down the ramp into blinding sunlight and scorching heat. Environmental sensors immediately warned of temperatures approaching the upper limits of Zolaxian tolerance, even with protective gear. Secure the perimeter, he ordered, warriors fanning out with practiced precision. But the perimeter contained nothing but barren rock, salt flats, and the strange poles arranged in a perfect circle around their landing site. Strike Leader called his sensor technician. These devices, their primitive projection technology. As if responding to the observation, the devices activated simultaneously. Holographic images flickered to life, forming a ring of windows into what appeared to be Terran military facilities. The footage showed humans in various training scenarios, each more brutal than the last. Teveroth approached one projector displaying a scenario labeled Stress Inoculation Training. Humans were systematically exposed to simulated drowning, then immediately required to solve complex mathematical equations. Those who failed were subjected to the process again and again until they succeeded. Another projection showed humans in environmental chambers where temperatures rapidly cycled between extremes that would kill most species. The subjects exhibited signs of pain, but continued performing assigned tasks with methodical focus. Most disturbing was footage of psychological conditioning. Humans were presented with impossible scenarios, no-win situations designed to break their mental resistance. Instead of surrendering, they consistently found unexpected solutions, often by changing the parameters of the challenge itself. "They don't accept failure as an option," murmured Teveroth's second-in-command. "They redefine the conditions until success becomes possible." As night fell, bringing blessed relief from the heat only to replace it with bitter cold, the Zolaxian force established a defensive perimeter. Environmental shelters deployed, and warriors clustered together in traditional protective formations, backs together, weapons facing outward. It was then that the darkness beyond their perimeter came alive with pinpoints of red light, thousands of them, dancing across armored carapaces. The targeting lasers moved with deliberate precision, concentrating on vulnerable joints, sensory organs, and the precisely documented weaknesses of Zolaxian physiology. "Hold position," Teveroth ordered, fighting instinctive terror. They would have fired already if that was their intention. Throughout the night, the lasers remained, never firing, simply watching, adjusting. Occasionally, a targeting point would shift slightly, as if the unseen operators were refining their aim or testing different approach vectors. When dawn finally broke, the lasers vanished, replaced by a single human figure standing just beyond weapon range. The beam made no aggressive moves, simply stood observing, taking notes on a primitive handheld device. After several minutes of this unnerving scrutiny, the human nodded once, as if confirming a hypothesis, then turned and walked away, seemingly unconcerned about presenting their back to armed opponents. "Should we pursue?" asked the second-in-command. Teveroth's antennae quivered with indecision. "No, that's what they want us to do. To leave our defensive position, to follow them into territory they've prepared." What he didn't say, what every warrior now understood, was that their defensive position was an illusion. The previous night had demonstrated with crushing clarity that their defenses meant nothing. The humans could have eliminated them at any moment, from any direction, with perfect precision. Instead, they had chosen to administer another lesson. We can reach you anywhere. We can target any vulnerability. And we choose when, or if, to strike. The once pristine command deck of the indomitable Dominion had deteriorated along with the mental state of its crew. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across workstations where exhausted Zolaxians monitored systems they no longer trusted. The air recyclers emitted an off-key hum that engineering could not eliminate, as if the ship itself was expressing distress. Vexthar reviewed the latest status reports with growing resignation. 3 more vessels had attempted unauthorized departure from the system, only to find their navigation systems locked on circular courses that brought them back to Earth orbit. The crews of 2 ships had abandoned their posts entirely, huddling in central chambers where they believed, incorrectly, that human infiltrators could not reach them. "We're losing control," Admiral Kexvor acknowledged, his once commanding presence diminished by exhaustion. His exoskeleton had lost its luster, stress-induced molting leaving patches of new growth that had not yet hardened properly. The lower ranks are sharing stories, creating their own mythology about these humans. "What kind of stories?" Vexthar asked. "That they can alter their physical form, that they exist partially in another dimension, that they can read thoughts and predict the future." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in distress. Rational soldiers now claimed to see humans in empty corridors, only for the figures to vanish when approached. Some refused to sleep at all, believing they'll be examined during unconsciousness. A communications specialist approached cautiously. "Commander, we're receiving transmissions from the planetary landing forces. They're requesting extraction." "On what grounds?" "They report persistent psychological warfare tactics." And she hesitated. Several units describe encounters with single human observers who appear to be studying their reactions, recording their behaviors. Vexthar absorbed this information silently. The pattern was consistent. The humans weren't attempting to destroy their forces, but to study them, to document their responses to various stimuli, like laboratory specimens. "What of the food synthesizers?" he asked, changing topics abruptly. Science officer Zexley's antennae drooped. "Still malfunctioning, Commander. They continue producing approximations of Earth cuisine regardless of programmed inputs. The latest items are accompanied by survey cards requesting feedback on taste and texture." Vexthar was formulating a response when a sudden commotion erupted at the engineering station. A technician was staring at his console in horror. "The hyperdrive components," he chittered frantically. "They're rearranged." Engineering Chief Bortel rushed to the station, reviewed the schematics, then turned to Vexthar with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "It's true, Commander. During routine diagnostics, we discovered the primary spatial manifolds have been disassembled and reconstructed in a configuration we've never seen before." He hesitated. "The concerning part is, efficiency has increased by 23%. They're not just studying us," Vexthar realized. "They're improving us." The implications settled over the command staff, the final humiliation. Their technology, the pride of 17 conquered star systems, was being casually redesigned by a species they had dismissed as primitive. In that moment, Vexthar made his decision. 17 campaigns had brought him to this point. 17 victories against opponents who followed comprehensible rules of engagement. But this was not warfare as the Zalaxian Imperium understood it. This was something else entirely. "Clear the command deck," he ordered. When only his most trusted officers remained, he activated the secure communication system, though he doubted its security meant anything anymore. "Draft a message to be broadcast on all frequencies," he instructed. "I seek terms." Admiral Kextor's mandibles clattered in shock. "Commander, the High Command will never." "The High Command isn't here," Vexthar interrupted. "They haven't experienced what we have. They haven't seen." He trailed off, remembering the empty helmet, the coffee cups, the casual human sitting in his quarters. "This isn't a battle we can win through conventional means. It's not a battle at all. It's a demonstration." The message was transmitted, brief and direct. Within moments, a response appeared on Vexthar's private terminal, a terminal physically disconnected from all networks. "Mare Tranquillitatis, the Sea of Tranquility. The coffee shop. You'll know it when you see it. Come alone. Bring your appetite." Vexthar stared at the message, understanding flowing through him like cold water. The humans had expected this outcome from the beginning. Every maneuver, every psychological tactic had been designed to bring him to precisely this point, to make him seek terms voluntarily, believing it was his own decision. And knowing this did nothing to change his course of action. If anything, it confirmed its necessity. The lunar surface stretched before Vexthar in silent desolation as he guided the shuttle toward coordinates he had been given. His escort vessels had been firmly rejected in the terse communications that followed his request for terms. He would come alone, or negotiations would become unnecessarily complicated, a euphemism whose meaning required no translation. The anomaly appeared on sensors long before it became visible, a perfect cube of atmospheric pressure and Earth normal temperature on the airless lunar landscape. As the shuttle descended, Vexthar beheld a structure that defied rational explanation, a freestanding building with large transparent windows, containing what cultural databases identified as a coffee shop. No environmental dome enclosed it. No visible technology maintained the atmosphere that simply stopped at its walls, as if held back by an invisible barrier. Inside, a single human sat reading a physical book, occasionally sipping from a steaming cup. Vexthar completed landing procedures with mechanical precision, his training asserting itself despite the surreal circumstances. The shuttle's atmospheric analysis confirmed the impossible. A bubble of breathable air surrounded the structure, extending exactly 2 meters from its walls on all sides. As he stepped through the invisible barrier, Vexthar experienced a moment of instinctive panic, then surprise as his respiratory system processed oxygen slightly richer than Zolaxian preference, but entirely compatible with his physiology. The temperature adjusted subtly as he approached the entrance, shifting to match Zolaxian comfort parameters. A small metal device above the door emitted a pleasant chiming sound as he entered. The human looked up and smiled. "Commander Vexthar," she said, rising. "Captain Sullivan, Terran Special Forces. We spoke briefly during your reconnaissance." She gestured to a chair clearly designed to accommodate Zolaxian anatomy. "Please, join me." The interior defied Vexthar's expectations. Rather than a stark military facility, the space featured soft lighting, comfortable furnishings, and enticing aromas. Other tables displayed refreshments suited to various alien physiologies, some familiar to Vexthar, others entirely unknown. "You've done this before," he observed, carefully settling his weight onto the chair. "First contact is our specialty," Sullivan confirmed, pouring a dark liquid into a cup shaped for Zolaxian mandibles. "This establishment maintains a permanent presence on the lunar surface. We find neutral territory promotes more productive discussions." Permanent. Vexthar's optical clusters adjusted in surprise. "Our sensors detected no structures here prior to our arrival." Sullivan's expression conveyed polite amusement. "Yes, we know." The implication settled into Vexthar's consciousness. Their most advanced detection systems had been blinded to a structure that had existed in plain sight. More concerning was what else they might have failed to detect. "Try the cappuccino," Sullivan suggested, sliding the cup toward him. "Our xenobiologists assure me it's not only safe, but potentially quite enjoyable for your species." Vexthar's analysis tools confirmed no toxins, though they struggled to identify several chemical compounds. After a moment's hesitation, he sampled the beverage. Complex flavors registered: bitter, sweet, creamy, triggering pleasure receptors he hadn't known existed. "Why this approach?" he asked finally. "If your technology is so advanced, why not simply destroy our fleet?" Sullivan considered the question thoughtfully. "Contrary to what you might now believe, we're not a naturally aggressive species. We prefer peaceful relations when possible." She paused. "But we've learned harsh lessons about showing weakness to potential threats." She activated a small device that projected historical images: Earth cities in ruins, human casualties from what appeared to be internal conflicts. "Our species nearly destroyed itself multiple times before reaching the stars. We emerged from our crucible with a philosophy that has served us well. Trust, but verify. Welcome with open arms, but be prepared to end threats decisively." The projection shifted to show scenes from other worlds, species Vexthar recognized, and many he did not, engaged in peaceful exchange with humans. "Most civilizations we encounter become valuable allies," Sullivan continued. "We trade, we learn from each other, we grow together." Her expression hardened slightly. "But those who come with conquest in mind discover our other capabilities." Vexthar's mandibles clicked in understanding. "The treaty terms." Sullivan presented a document inscribed on what appeared to be paper but possessed unusual properties: slight luminescence, resistance to tearing, molecular stability his scanners couldn't fully analyze. The terms were straightforward: complete withdrawal from Sol system, recognition of Earth's sovereign territory extending to the Kuiper Belt, and establishment of diplomatic relations, including cultural and scientific exchange. "These are surprisingly lenient," Vexthar admitted. "We don't seek retribution, Commander, only security." Sullivan's gaze was penetrating. "Though I should mention the non-negotiable addendum." She activated her device again, displaying technical specifications for small objects identified as observation modules. These have already been installed throughout your fleet, she explained. They'll remain inactive unless your empire reconsiders its position regarding Earth. Vexthar understood the implicit threat. The humans had demonstrated their ability to infiltrate Selaxian vessels at will. These devices were less a practical measure than a psychological reminder. One last question, Vexthar said, mandibles twitching with suppressed emotion. Why show us this place? This capacity of yours. Sullivan's expression softened minutely. So you understand completely. So there are no misunderstandings or future miscalculations. She gestured around them. This facility exists in 17 separate dimensional states simultaneously. What you perceive is merely its intersection with your reality. She touched her cup gently to his in what cultural databases identified as a ritual gesture of agreement. Safe journey home, Commander. We'll be watching. Always.